Hello friends, welcome back to the Craft Castle. Today we're going to learn how to make a pencil jig for your Glowforge. Jigs are super important if you are going to be engraving like a whole bunch of small little things, and lining up perfectly tends to be a little bit of a headache and a nightmare. I'm going to create this jig so that it'll fit into my Glowforge all the time, and I will have a saved file so when I get an order for some engraved pencils, all I have to do is add in the new names, save it, and upload it, and then I will have a forever jig. This one I used white acrylic for, and the reason why I decided to go with a permanent one is just so I don't have to keep cutting my jigs and trying to figure out every single time I go to do one how to realign things. I know people do that and they make them really small, and that's fine for them, but I just like to have something that's permanent. So this right here I will always have. And so if it's like 6 months before I get an engraved pencil order, all I have to do is open up this file, put in my names, set this into my Glowforge bed, and I don't even have to align anything, figure anything out, because it all fits in there perfectly into my Glowforge. Okay, so for this project, you're just going to need a piece of proof grade material. It doesn't matter what it is, as long as it's a proof grade, or if you have material that's cut perfectly to the bed size, that honeycomb size for your Glowforge, that's okay too. But all we want to make sure is that we have something that fits perfectly into our honeycomb tray of our Glowforge. That being said, previously I have used cardboard to do my jig. That was fine for a little while until the inside portions of my pencil jig started to move around, and then I wasn't getting centered engravings onto my pencil jig or onto my pencils. So I don't suggest doing like cardboard or anything like that. I would definitely suggest getting something that's proof grade. Okay, then all you're gonna need to do is grab a pencil. These are, I don't know how to pronounce them, but they're these pencils, and I just have a full box of them. You're really only gonna need just one pencil, so we're for dimensions. Then a fabric measuring tape or a regular measuring tape, because we are going to make some measurements and create our jig. Okay, I'm going to show you how to make this in Inkscape, which is a free design program. It's the design program that I know and love for my Glowforge. Okay, so the very first thing you're going to want to do is open up a blank window in Inkscape. Then what we're going to do is we're going to change our canvas size. So what we're going to do is we're going to go up here into File and Document Properties. This new box is going to pop up, making sure that this is in inches because I use inches. I am going to take my proof grade material. I am also going to take my measuring tape of choice, and I am going to measure out my width and my height on my piece of material. So for this particular piece, it is going to be 20.5 by 11.75. So coming over here into the width, I'm going to change this over to 20.5, and then this is going to be 11.75, and then press return. And then once you have that, we're just going to press this X button. Now, this rectangle that we see that is on our screen now is this right here, the full rectangle. Now what we need is the inside portions of our jig. So taking the thing that you want to create the jig with, I'm using a pencil. I am going to take my ruler, and I'm going to measure out. This pencil is 7.5 inches. Now I don't want them to be necessarily too tight. Like I don't want to have to jam them in. So I'm going to make it just a little bit bigger from the 7.5 inches. So I'm going to make it 8 inches. That way it fits nice and snug in there. And then the width of that pencil is a little over 1/4 of an inch. So I'm going to make it 1/2 inch. That way it just lays nicely into our rectangles. So what I want to do is come over here into this box, and I'm just going to draw a box. I don't care about the size right now, just make a box. Then I want to come up over here into the arrow tool, and I'm going to change this millimeters over to inches because that's what I know is inches. Now for the width, remember I was going to do 8 inches, and then I'm going to press tab. Now for the height, remember I want to be 1/2 inch. So just press just like that, 0.5, and then press tab, and then you're good to go. Now, the very next step to this is we need to fill in our proof grade material with our jigs that we want. Now, if you are a Glowforge owner, you do know that just because our proof grade material is the size of what it is, we don't get the full cutting size board of this, right? So just to make sure that we're making this jig correctly, I'm going to Command D, which is duplicate, and I'm going to duplicate that rectangle that we just created. Okay, and technically the cutting area that we get is 19.5 inches by 11 inches. Okay, that is going to be the maximum size that our Glowforge can cut. So in order to get it perfectly centered onto our project board, I'm just going to come over here into a line, and I'm going to do this relative to, instead of last selected, I'm going to click down and I'm going to do the page, which is that canvas that we created. And then I'm just going to press this center vertically and center horizontally. And now that box that we created, that's our maximum size cutting area. Okay, so now what you want to do is taking those rectangles that we created, and all we want to do is Command D, which is duplicate, and we're going to make a whole bunch of these. How many ever fit inside of our new cutting area box? Do you see how it says that the cusp mode is on, and it kind of doesn't want me to like move that box? If your cusp mode is on, you can just come over here to this button right here and let that unclick that, so then it won't like want to snap together. It doesn't matter if everything is aligned, because we're going to align that here in a second. And I want to fill in my project board with as many new rectangles that we've created. Okay, so I have one side done. That seems to be exactly as many as I'm going to fit onto my project board. Remember, we want to keep it inside this rectangle. So I'm going to select my first line, and I'm going to come over here. Instead of it being relative to page, I'm just going to go with last selected. I'm going to align it to the center, and then I'm also going to come down here and I'm going to spread the objects out evenly throughout. So you see how now there's even spacing. This is a jig, and it probably, if it was for you, you probably didn't need to do either of these steps. It just helps later when you are adding your text in for like your pencils and stuff like that, to make sure that everything is aligned straight. It's probably the only reason why I would suggest doing that, but you definitely did not have to do that. Okay, so I'm going to scoot that over just a little bit. And then since I have everything highlighted and everything is aligned vertically and spaced out appropriately, I'm going to Command G, which is group. And then I'm going to Command D, which is duplicate, because I want to create a full proof grade material for this. It will look like nothing's happened. If you just drag over that new line, that new duplicate, you'll see that there's a new line. Now that I have two lines, I'm going to make sure that they're both centered appropriately together. I am now going to select both of those new lines, and I'm just going to center it horizontally. Now these pencils, you really can only get two lines through it. You could make some of those pencils go vertically. I'm not going to do that for this, but that is an option for you. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to Command G, which is group, selecting just that. I'm going to come over here to relative to, and I'm going to go back over into page, and I'm going to center my now jigs to the center of my project board. Okay, so now since everything fits inside of my cutting area, I'm just going to delete that rectangle. I don't need that. Make sure to delete that, because we don't want to cut our jig out. We want to make sure that our whole proof grade material stays what it is. Okay, so those rectangles that you see on the screen are going to be all of your rectangles that you cut out right here. Now, this next step is going to be very important, because we are creating this jig so we can use it time and time again. So we're never going to have to create another jig for this. You want to lock this in place, because right now I can move this around. So if I were to add texts to this, if I were to do anything to this file and I were to try and maneuver it, I could, right? So what we want to do is making sure it's centered on our page, which is center into our proof grade material. I'm going to right click and I'm going to lock selected groups. If we click out of that and then we try and click on our new rectangles, we can't move it around. So then what you can do is you can come in here and we can do, like, let's say we're doing pencils for a teacher. I'm going to add in my text box, and I'm going to push this over into the middle of that rectangle. I'm going to go ahead and doing the same thing I did before. We're just going to come in here. We're going to fill in all these little rectangles with our new engravings that we created. When I have one side done, the same thing we did when we were creating the jig. We are going to come over here. We're going to select all of them. We are going to center it. I'm going to come over here. Instead of doing relative to page, I'm just going to do last selected. I'm going to make sure that everything is centered vertically and then also evenly distributed. If we zoom in, see how now everything is going to be evenly distributed inside of this rectangle. That's exactly what you wanted. Okay, when you have one, Command G, which is group, and Command D, which is duplicate. And then we're just dragging over that top layer over to the other side of our jig. Okay, when you have both, we just select both, make sure that they're aligned horizontally together. Now, in order to get text box to not have a error message and disappear on you, what you want to do is select both of these. We're going to Command Shift and C, which is creating a path. Then you want to Command Shift G, which is ungroup. And it looks like everything just ungrouped to each particular line. So let's ungroup again and making sure that every single text box is all empty. And then we're going to Command Shift and plus sign, which is welding everything together. Okay, I am going to save my SVG file as pencil jig, and I'm just going to press save. I'm going to find my file that I have saved and upload it into the Glowforge app. Okay, I loaded up my pencil jig into the Glowforge app, and here it is, and it fits perfectly, nice and perfect, inside my proofgrade material. Now, if you have not cut your pencil jig, because I have already cut mine, I'm not going to cut mine. What you want to do is you want to hide your engraving. So we're going to come over here into our engravings, and we're going to press ignore. We are going to cut our jig out first. So you're going to notice that my jig now looks differently than what I've created for you. And the reason for that is because the jig that I just created is going to be different than the one that I had before. Because I did not cut that jig out that we created. I just inserted my original jig into my Glowforge and opened up my original pencil jig file. When I put mine in there, do you see how now my lines are lined up perfectly? If I go and delete these rectangles, because technically we don't need them anymore, all of my pencils are lined up with the engraving. Now, because the Glowforge has like a fisheye lens, you are essentially trusting that you have gotten your math correctly and that you've created your jig correctly. Do not trust in the lens, because the lens is a fishbowl and it distorts things. However, I can see that when I added in my pencils, you can see these pencils, I need to clean my Glowforge. But you can see these pencils right here, and you can see how they are bumping up to the left of that metal piece. All I'm going to do is I'm going to take these selections and I'm just going to move them down a little bit. So now they're not going to hit that bottom of that metal. Let's just delete these. Okay, I'm going to change these all over into score, because I used a single line font. In a previous tutorial, I did show you how to make your own single line fonts. It's going to make things a lot quicker. Okay, and then all you're going to do is you're going to press ready. It was that easy. Okay, so because I used a single line font, this thing is going to take me a whopping 2.5 minutes. So I'm going to go and press that magic button, and I will see you in 2.5 minutes. Okay, so my pencils are done, and they are so stinking cute. These are words of affirmation pencils. I absolutely love making them. Perfect. Did not have any issues. Now, again, because we've locked everything in place, you're going to be able just to upload these and change out the names, personalizations, and then be done in minutes, versus having to remake your jig every single time you want to do a new pencil file. And that's it. Now you have a permanent jig that you can use forever and some engraved pencils. You can use this entire tutorial to make your own jig of any kind. Like if you're doing like glasses, balls, like golf tees, like wallets, anything like that you're going to be making multiples of, you can just make a jig. And then the hard part is already over for you forever. All right, y'all, I sure hope I inspired you to create, and I will see you later.